Good morning. You are listening to or watching the Citizen Body Cast. This is the Citizen Body Podcast, where we talk with different guests and different folks about a lot of the different things that, instead of the things that divide us, we like to talk about what unites us as people. We have with us today the co-founder of the Citizen Body, John Katrina, and we also have with us today Danny Ehrlichman. Danny, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what's that? You might notice there's a little bit of an age difference between the three of us.
Yeah, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's fun to connect and talk to different generations. But so yeah, I'm Daniel Ehrlichman. I studied economics at Penn State. I graduated in 2017. From there, I got into the investment field. I worked as an analyst for Aberdeen Asset Management, which name has changed now. But so I originally was really focused into finance and investing. And then I kind of found out that the reason I liked looking at businesses is because I wanted to be a part of building businesses. So then I switched over to Endeavor. Originally was managing the sports performance gym, and then eventually ended up taking over as the CEO, which is the position I hold currently.
Okay. So you're CEO of Endeavor Athletics. So what is, tell us about it. What is it?
Yeah, so it's a Philadelphia-based athletic clothing company. And what we're really trying to do is lead something that we call the craft apparel movement, which is the focus on quality versus, volume, which you could say like Nike, Under Armour. Their game is high volume, lower quality. We really wanted to focus on kind of what the craft beer industry did, which is we want to make really great products that people love, and we don't have to hit these crazy sale numbers. It's more about the quality of the products we're making and the value we're trying to create. And it's just where we think things are going to lead to, because it's more sustainable. You have more ethical practices, and I think people want quality things now versus quick flash gear that's going to fall apart after a couple washes.
Yeah, I noticed like when I purchase like when I'm like, oh, I've got to replace some of my workout clothes, because after a while they do wear out. There's certain things that just don't wear out, and they're a staple in the closet. And I'll be honest with you, I'm willing to pay a little bit more money for something like that than having to buy a new pair of workout pants every 3 to 6 months or something. Right. You put it on and you try it on, you're like, it just feels like it's falling off of you. Like you want something that's quality.
Yeah, you're going to pay a little bit more up front, but you're actually going to save money in longer term. And you don't have to, you're not going to be throwing out as many clothes, because they're going to last you a while. So overall, it's just a more sustainable business practice. And I just think that that's where things are going to eventually go. And people, you have these brands that, like with beer, for instance, you have these new craft beer brands that people love, and they feel really, they feel like an emotional tie to them because they represent something, represent quality. And I always believe that if people are going to spend their hard-earned money with me, I want to make sure they're getting the best gear. I don't want to make sure that we're getting the best profit margin, because that doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't interest me to do that. I want people to be like, this is my favorite short. This is my favorite shirt. And I think I'm seeing that now a lot more. And we're hoping that by leading the craft apparel movement, that we can inspire other businesses and show them different routes of, hey, you don't have to go for the $1 billion. You can go for like the really great quality value business and have a really nice business without, compromising the quality or, just going to places and taking advantage of poor countries for get the best prices. Like you don't have to do those things if you're in the craft movement.
Yeah, kind of sounds a little like the Citizen Body here. It's kind of tying the whole thing together.
It does. Well, and that's the funny thing is, as Danny and I's conversations, and I was working in Danny's business as a consultant. That's how we met. And we immediately connected on philosophy. And as we're kind of forming the ideas, getting the Citizen Body going, what we call the quote unquote operating system that just keeps evolving. That idea of craft is basically taking on more responsibility as a human being. One of the 8 things that unite us is human responsibility. So when you want to provide quality, you realize that the fashion industry actually is one of the major contributors to, burning up resources and pollution. I don't think a lot of people realize that, like, the throwaway fashion deals with uses of water and all kinds of resources in fabric. And it's not something that is at the forefront of people's understanding. So a craft movement is something that you have for a long time. It's more about the quality of the product than the fashion du jour. And, it's trying to strike that balance between, say, when you had something that was such high quality, it was going to be passed down generations, or you bought one pair of dress shoes and you had them for, a lot of your career, and you got them resold and things like that. So that was a respect for and a consideration of more of the planet, the people, your finances, how they're spent. And that's what the craft movement, I think, represents. And the citizen body is about people balancing that sense of their own success, but what that success is costing in terms of not just environmental impact, but impact on the rest of the citizen body, the rest of the people.
And just to go off that, I think that's something that, I talk about. You think about the companies like Nike, Under Armour, that, multi-billion-dollar companies, and, people are attracted to that idea of making billions of dollars. But then what the craft beer industry has shown is that there is this ecosystem of thousands of different brands that are making a lot of money. They're not making as much as Anheuser-Busch, right? But they're taking these companies are taking all the market share away from Anheuser-Busch because their pursuit is, I want to make the best possible beer. And there's all these great businesses, and people love their jobs, and they, like, you talk to people that are into beer, it's like a cult, and they've built this community, and that is extremely successful, and it's sustainable. And I think that's what people have to take away. If people, you show them, like, hey, just because you do the craft movement doesn't mean you can't make any money. It's actually where a lot of the value is being created in today's economy. So that's what I'm really hopeful to see, is that you're starting to see it in different pockets of the economy. And in the end, by having more smaller businesses, it balances out, the economy and
the body. Yeah, we
no,
like
it
to
balances
say
out the economy, and it's actually healthier that way, because it makes the economy anti-fragile, because you have a bunch of businesses. So, like, one goes under, you don't have thousands of people losing their jobs. There's a lot of reasons. I know I'm getting into the economics of it, but for me, it's I do, like, when you're pursuing quality and you take it very seriously, because like I said, people are spending their hard-earned dollars, and I want to make sure that they get the best possible product. That's my responsibility. Is if something breaks, I take that very seriously, because I know you're working really hard at your job. You have bills, you have healthcare, you have to pay, you have all these things. So if you're gonna trust me in buying gear from me, I want to make sure that I can deliver that to you. And that's kind of what I get inspired by the craft movement is that type of approach.
Yeah. So
and
I know
what we say is it's a million millionaires instead of one trillionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And just think about that balance and how that's healthier,
Mm-hmm.
that you're creating more wealth it's on its own volition as a self-sustaining system, distributed more evenly without someone dictating that distribution.
Mm-hmm.
That's the craft movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think also what is interesting to me also is, Danny, you are about 26 years old.
Mm-hmm. 26, yeah.
And you're a CEO.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
it's pretty, I don't like the title CEO, because to me, once again, my goal is, I'm so focused into the creative process of building products. But yeah, it is, when I stop and think about it, it is a little bit crazy that I have these responsibilities, and I'm leading teams, and I'm dealing with manufacturers that, these people have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and their manufacturers have been around for hundreds of years creating clothes. And when I step back, it is a little crazy.
Yeah.
But
How long have you been doing it?
so I've been the CEO for about a year and 7 months.
Okay.
And it's been an absolute pleasure of a learning experience. And I don't mean it's been fun. There's been a lot of challenges and struggles. I mean, we're going through the pandemic, and that's been crushing retail. But the opportunity to develop these new skills, to be creative, to be resourceful. I know that in anything that I do in the future, it might really stink right now. Like, it's not fun. There's a lot of times where I'm not, I'm very stressed out, and there's a lot of sleepless nights. But
Yeah.
at the end of that, I know that I'm developing skills that in the future I can do whatever I'd like to, because it's going to be nothing compared to the challenges that we're going through right now. And that's really what motivates me and helps me push through those struggles, is that at the end of it, I know that I'm developing these skills that I really believe this, that hopefully I can, do other things that have a greater impact. Like, I study economics. I'm really passionate about economics, and I want to get involved more in that later in my life, for the purpose of, creating a more equal economy. And there's some nasty things that are going on in the economy right now, that there's this, what me and my dad we call it the great distortion. And a lot of people aren't aware of why it's happening. And, but I know that to be able to put myself in a position to really help people, I have to go through these challenges that make me develop skills, so that if I want to take on more challenges, I have the skills too.
Yeah. And it's great that you can you're bringing your education, you're bringing your experiences that you've gotten in the financial world, and you're bringing them into creating your own business. And you're building everything from the ground up. It's like, it just kind of blows my, like, I think about, like, John, when we were 26, what were we doing?
Well, at that point, I was starting a business too, but I'm a little crazy and wacky. But most people, I think, were in school and getting into their first job, or just still in school, getting their master's or PhD, or, training of some kind at that point,
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I was on my second career. Like, John and I are Generation X, and we're probably one of the first generations. I think the generation before us always valued, like, company loyalty. You work for a company.
Sure.
And we were one of the first generations where it kind of became okay to job hop and career hop. And, our parents would be saying to us, they're like, what are you doing? You're going from college to now you're doing this, to now you're a bartender. Now you work at a bank. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And like, now that's like nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was okay for us to change jobs or change careers every few years.
Yeah.
And now, like, for your generation, it's like you can come out of this in the starting gate and just run with it. And
it's funny. So my mom is a very traditional person, who was like, when I said I wanted to leave my very secure finance job, great job, she was like, what? And then I also have the balance of my dad, who is, traditional in some ways, but he's a little bit more nuanced, that he was like, yeah, okay, go for it. So it was like this nice balance of, hey, also be aware that, you don't want to become the person that does jump. You want to commit to something to develop those skills. So it's like, I always encourage people when they're younger to try things and get a little bit of a flavor of what they like and don't like. But at the same time, there is a component of, you need to choose something and stick to it to develop the skills to be successful. So it's having that balance and awareness, is you don't want to go too far in one spectrum where you're like, I just want to do something I love. And it's like, well, you don't know yet because you haven't had enough experience. So do something that is going to force you to grow and develop skills and put you into new areas that you may be lacking because you just come straight from college. And then from there, you can kind of move into the areas that you really want to work on. So like when I started working at Endeavor, I mean, I started as a sales associate. So like let that sink in. I went from being this high paid investment job to a sales associate. And
Yeah.
I was managing, I was working at a salon selling leggings, and at that salon, I knew that there were people from my high school that were coming in, seeing me there selling the leggings. So it's really humbling. But what always, kept me going was that this is just a stepping stone. I learned so much from being in that environment of, this is my little store that I have to manage, and I have to create sales, and I have to do all these different things that gave me the confidence to eventually move into another role, and then that built more skills, and that gave me the confidence to become the CEO. The confidence came from a place of, I was working 7 days a week. I was putting the time in. I was seeing myself develop versus like, I just think I'm great. And it's like, I think was a really good lesson that I think a lot of people, because you want to jump, when you have this idea of yourself, you want to jump into the position that you want versus the position you need to be in to get to the position you want. And, but when you start the process of being on the ground floor, it almost becomes addicting because you start to see yourself develop the skills and your confidence starts to build. And it's true confidence. It's not the confidence that comes and goes with the wind. And that was such like, I like starting as a sales associate was such a blessing for me. And I think that it was such a humbling experience that now I almost, seek that be starting as a beginner in different areas of my life, because you just learn so much about yourself.
Yeah. And we're also even talking a little bit about like a lot of those lessons can be painful. And a lot of people don't want to go through the pain. They don't want to do the hard work that comes along with having to learn that new skill. Like you just want to be there. You want to be in that spot. And then I think sometimes, the way that our culture has been lately, it's been, all reward first, and a lot like people don't necessarily seem as willing to put the work in sometimes.
Yeah.
And
when you think about that, the whole pain dynamic is, I always like, if I ask someone, if somebody's listening to this and they're avoiding pain and they know it, or they're not really pushing themselves, are you in any less pain versus going through the tough challenge that you want to, whether you want to get in better shape? Like, you're in just as much pain not doing it. And I know people like, they're like, you're sad, you don't feel like you don't feel like you have the self-respect, or you're down on yourself. Is that pain you're going through of starting to exercise? The difference is the reward you feel on the other side is, you're going to become more self-confident. You're going to have, more self-respect. You're going to, learn things about yourself that you can't even imagine.
Yeah.
And it also gives you purpose and meaning that you don't realize. It's like, I'm becoming a better person, and that, now that I exercise and I'm in a better mood, I treat my family better. I treat my girlfriend better. I'm a better son. Like, though, like, either one, you're going to have pain. Like, pain is just a natural occurrence in life, and it is a part of the human condition. And if you choose the right pain, you can make your life a lot more enjoyable in a weird way. It's just struggling for the right things.
Yeah. It was funny. I'm just a little aside. I was in a trip to Florida several years ago, and I remember the saying, "Pain is weakness leaving the body." And I saw that and it's obviously the Marines. It's one of their slogans that they use. And I was at an air show, and they had different like little booths set up and different things that you could do. And and I've always worked out. I've always, been fairly athletic. I'm not, winning medals or anything like that. But, I'm fine with the training. I love cycling, and cycling is all about, how much pain can you endure, and how long can you endure it for? And I went to this Marines thing, and they said they wanted you to be able to hold yourself up on a bar. And I said, all right. And they said, like in a chin up position. And for women, it's, with your hands like this. And, until, you could lower yourself down. And once your elbows lock out, then you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how long do I need to hold myself like that? And I swear the guy said, 8 seconds. 8 seconds of this? Of course I can do
No
it.
problem. Yeah.
No problem, right? So they hoisted me up onto the board. And I'd been a gymnast when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, I got this. Because I can get that t-shirt that says pain is weakness leaving the body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wanted. And I got there and I held on. And I was counting in my head. And I'm like, it seems like it's been a lot more than 8 seconds. And I said, how much time do I have left? And he was like, he goes, oh, you got another 57 seconds. I said, what? And I said, I thought you said this was 8 seconds. He said, no, 80. Oh. And then the task became a little bit more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I did have a lot more time to go. And then, of course, I'm getting that burn in my biceps and I'm still holding the bar tight. And then I eventually kind of had to start to let it loose. And I missed it by 8 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I got to 72 seconds until my elbows locked out and I couldn't do it. And so I did get a water bottle that said pain is weakness leaving the body. I didn't get the t-shirt, but
yeah.
But it's funny, like you just putting in that work, like knowing, like, what's the expectation? What is it that I have to achieve? They lowballed me. I thought I could do it, and then it was like, oh, wow, this is a lot bigger a task than I thought it was going to be. And I would think that going from a CEO, as I'm talking to you, you say you start out like, you were a sales associate and it's like, okay, what are you responsible for with that? You got to clean the store, you're responsible for making sales. That might be if you're commission based, that's affecting your income. If you're not commission based, you still want to see the store succeed. So it still, behooves you to sell that product, but you're not responsible for the actual production of the garment. You're not responsible for, the maintenance of the building or paying the lease or any of those. Like there's so much more that goes into being a CEO. And it's funny, as we didn't really put a timeline on where we are right now, but I think yesterday or 2 days ago, I think we heard in the news that Jeff Bezos was stepping down from Amazon. And that's one of the biggest corporations that we know of in our time right now. I think not, if not the biggest, and he's stepping down as CEO. And when I think of CEO and Jeff Bezos, I'm thinking, I don't know how much money he's worth, but I know it's a ridiculous amount. And in my head, I think, private jets and multiple homes and able to do all these things. And then I see you, my friend, 26-year-old CEO, and you're in a place of you're working, you don't have all that.
No. I live at home. I don't spend a lot of money on, I can't do that now, but like my friends are always going out to bars and, restaurants, and before COVID, and I never really did that. I was really mainly focused on building this business. And to go back to pain is where I think that we can tie it into my generation, is that, you got to have a why, you got to have a reason you're doing something. And I think that makes the pain worth it. So, whereas like maybe the older generations are like, you just got to, run through it, deal with it. For my generation, it's like, you got to find your why. Like, okay, this might not be exactly like where you want to go, like what do you want to be doing for the rest of your life, but are you getting one step closer to where you want to be? And tying in that why, makes you able to, withstand all the challenges, because that's kind of the motivation behind the scene of like, this sucks right now, but I'm getting closer to who I want to become. And that's really helped me. So when I was in the store, I was like, this is embarrassing. I'm selling women's leggings. I gave up this job. My friends probably think I'm crazy. Everyone thought I was crazy. But to me, it made all the sense in the world. And that's, because I know where I want to go. And that was part of the process. My advice to people is like, if you have a good why, it doesn't have to be directly tied to it right away, but you're developing the skills that for when that opportunity does come, you can take it fully on. Because there was opportunities that I took on that I failed miserably at simply because I didn't, do the work beforehand to really understand the responsibilities that come with it. And that's just part of, when you're young, that's just part, like, you gotta fail. Like, it's just, I think that's why a lot of people avoid pain is they have this fear of failure, because what you see on Instagram, what you see on TikTok, you see these, what seem to be overnight successes, or, those types of things where you're like, it's not happening for me. I've been doing it for 6 months. It's not happening. It's like, no. No. LeBron James didn't become the best basketball player in 6 months. He spent his whole life training to get to where he's at. Success doesn't happen overnight. I'm expecting to work, 5 to 10 years with minimal results and not make a lot of money. I'm totally okay with that. But because I know where I want to be and where I want to go.
You know what your why is.
Yeah.
And Sue, I wanted to say on that why, it's like when we talk about the 8 things that we do at the Citizen Body that unite all human beings, that comes under human creativity, because it's like your why is what you're trying to create. Your why is what problem you're trying to solve. A solution is a creation, right? You've solved something, so you've created something better, an answer. You've created an answer, and maybe a usable answer that helps you then go create other things or advance technology. But I think it would be good for the listeners to know that Danny and I got involved, and I watched him go through these stages. And as basically twice his age, we both had this mentality. What we connected on was a philosophy and a mentality of, it doesn't matter what your title is. I'm a consultant. He's a CEO or whatever he was at the time. I did sales associate work too, because I knew startups and I knew how it is. I'm a working consultant. I'm not someone that, just says, I don't get involved in this or that. Like when you have a problem to solve together and you're trying to get something launched, you feel the sense of responsibility. So there's 2 elements of the 8 things that unite, I think, all human beings at play here. One is human creativity. What are you trying to create? And then 2 is the responsibilities. Is your creation going to have a positive impact, not just for you, but also is it going to have a positive impact for society, for your fellow human beings? And it was my conversation with Danny where I realized he had that in him, and some people don't have as much awareness or care as much about that. Mm-hmm. I didn't. I know when I was Danny's age, and I think, Sue, you asked what I was doing at his age, and I will say this. I was really just mainly concerned with the money, because money was a pain point in my life because of my upbringing. I wasn't completely impoverished like, some people, but I was well below peers, and it always bothered me. And, just simple things like not having a home to bring friends over to, mm-hmm. or a car with air conditioning, or having to roll up the windows manually in the car, having the car always break down. And so it was in the 80s. Wall Street was just out, and you become a little bit preoccupied. Say, well, once I solve my money pain problem, then I'll do some good work. That's actually a line in that movie. First, you have to hit the big time. Then you can be, and he uses this word like piddler and do good things. Then we extrapolate that to our entire culture, which is, if our entire culture is not looking at having a responsibility unto each other, and it's not looking about a why, that why is what we're creating going to help both myself and other people, you kind of see the results we have.
Yeah.
You see the results of money is the why, and the responsibility is not mine.
Yeah. I think what people don't realize, and maybe they are realizing now, is that we have an inherent responsibility because we are all interconnected together. I mean, if there is one thing that this pandemic has shown, is that all of our actions impact each other one way or another. And it may not always, rear its head in everyday life, but that is something when you become a leader, is that, or you're on a team or something like that, you start realizing that if you don't show up that day, or you forget to do something, or you don't feel like doing something, there's a cascade of effects that affect other people's lives. So in a startup, it can affect the people that are trusting you with their money that they invested into the business is, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm not going to do this task. And then it falls through the crack, and there's just a cascading effect. And I was actually talking to my friend recently, and he's 26, and he's the director of supply chain for a company, which is really impressive. But he doesn't plan to stay at that company for a while. And we were talking about managing people. And there was a scenario where he was saying that he knew he should step in and correct this person, and it would be an uncomfortable conversation. But since he didn't see being involved in the company longer term, he wasn't going to do it because he didn't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. And
that's where the aversion to pain can hurt you.
Right. But it's this, he doesn't realize that, okay, maybe it won't affect you directly, but not having that conversation after you leave you're creating problems that other people are going to have to solve. And it's your responsibility. You took that position to step in and have that uncomfortable conversation, but if people don't tie that in together, and it isn't until you're really working in a team environment that you start to see that there is an interconnectedness to everything you do. And that's life. That's life in general too. If I'm at home and I don't decide to take out the trash, or it affects everyone's lives. And even just those little things are important. And that's the inherent responsibility we all have just by being alive.
Yeah. And also,
and Sue, that's our first principle, is that unity is every action, word, and everything you do affects everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because like him, with not having that willingness to have that conversation, he actually kind of robbed himself of the opportunity to say, okay, here's where I can, I'm not comfortable with that conversation, but hey, I'm not going to be at this company for as long. Here's my chance to practice, because maybe down the line, I'm going to have to do it.
Well, he's most definitely going to have to do it. And he had a practice run that didn't have the repercussions aren't going to be as bad. But if he's finally doing what he really loves, it might not go well because you didn't have those repetitions of having those uncomfortable conversations. So it's tying in everything. It's like, it affects you, it affects other people. I think when you can mesh those together, people will view things in a different way, and be more willing to go through painful conversations, do things that are challenging, because hey, this affects not only me but the people around me.
Yeah. And the major learning, guys, it's funny how we get disconnected from this, but the major learning in our lives, from touching a hot stove to riding a bike to the first time we swam, to the first time we asked a member of the opposite sex out, or all of that involved passing through that pain threshold. I mean, I remember falling the first time I was riding a bike. I mean, even if you didn't fall, it was scary. How about the first time you got on the highway in a car, when you were 15 and getting your learner's permit? Like, it's if we run away from pain all the time, we become weak and incapable of dealing with overcoming the challenge. I mean, we know this from weightlifting. It's blatantly clear. Our problem is, and what we try to do in the Citizen Body, is find and help people differentiate between productive pain of growth, because without pain, really, it's very difficult to grow, because what your muscles are responding to is failure.
Yeah,
they're responding. They're saying, "Oh, yeah."
I think the caveat, just to, I guess, soften this a little bit, because I don't want people to think, oh, I'm going to go out and search for pain. It's like, take the gym. If the first day of going and working out, you try to bench 300 pounds, that's too much pain.
Yeah.
It's prescribing the right amount of pain, and in weight training it's called progressive overloading, which means you just add more weight, and it's doing that in your life. It's like, I think what also happens is people try to do too much too quick, instead of forming the habit of working out 10 minutes today for the first week, 15, then building, and that's productive pain in my mind. So, that's the only caveat, is like, don't go out and try to kill yourself and be like, this is going to help me. It's like, no, it's like anything, it's nuanced. prescribing the right amount for you at that right time, and knowing yourself, like, this is my limit. Maybe I go a little bit above it just to try it out, but doing it consistently is kind of what leads to the best results.
Yeah.
Danny, absolutely correct. And the balance is, the thing is when you're in the gym, you have a personal trainer, but in life, you maybe have your parents, but who else do you have? If you're lucky enough to have a good mentor at work. But see, my mentors were like, one was taking me down that money path. The microcosm of that enterprise was kind of what you see today with like giant corporations. Your mentors can really steer you, you know, through that pain if they're really, but it really helps. And that's what we're trying to grow at the Citizen Body, is helping people like get the pain in the right dose to actually grow. But obviously we're talking about muscles. It's a lot easier to see with a physical trainer. But it's much more difficult to see in your life. I mean, some people try to use religion, some people try to use philosophy, obviously, you know, mentors and things like that. But they're increasingly hard to find when your entire culture seems to be geared toward the money, fame, power, you know, instant gratification. So we're trying to turn that dial of balance back to the optimal level. That's why we call the system Optivo. So I think you were chiming in. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just going to add to that and say, you know, for me by trade, I work in physical therapy, and I work with mostly stroke and brain injury patients, and, you know, helping them learn how to, you know, walk and move around and do everything that, you know, try to get back to as much of their life as is possible after, you know, some sort of a traumatic event for them. And one of the things that, you know, you walk into the gym, and usually, you know, one of the older fellows might say, you know, in the generation above me or so, usually says, "No pain, no gain."
Yeah.
And and I hear that like very frequently. Everybody goes, "Well, I guess no pain, no gain." It's like, well, no, walking shouldn't hurt. You know, getting from point A to point B doesn't have to be painful. If you've got, you know, a diabetic neuropathy, there's medication for that, or there's different, you know, bracing, and there's different things that we can do to help you along. You know, it's not about me, you know, walking you as far as possible and sending your blood pressure through the roof. That's not a gain. You know, it's like you said, it's, you know, the progressive overload, you know, the principle of, you know, having a coach or somebody that can take a mentor that can take you through, you know, the right steps and getting to where you need to be. But, you know, any type of growth is going to have it's going to be some pain along the way. It doesn't have to be physical pain. It might be, you know, oh boy, I made a mistake. You know, I'm really, you know, I'm very embarrassed about that. It's, you know, I said something that offended somebody, and like for me, I know if I've done that, you know, I'll obsess about it in my head. That's emotionally painful because I feel bad that I caused somebody discomfort over something that I said that you know, just the wrong words popped out. I didn't say it the right way, but it's a mistake, and I learned, and I know not to say that again.
And you can, and Sue, you can beat yourself up too much as well as not enough, right?
Yeah.
So like, if you say something to offend somebody, you can be like, "Oh, I don't care, your problem," right? Or if you say something to offend them, you can try to understand where they're coming from, or you can obsess about it to where you're like, "I'm a terrible person," you know?
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do, is change this conversation that we're having, you know, in the zillions of podcasts, all the social media. You see these memes and things that are like one quick answer that are sort of like the, I mean, they're kind of just like the candy coated, you know, feel good sentiments. They're not really philosophy. There is some good stuff if you really know how to cull from those things. But that's what we're trying to do, is get to the usable, what we call philosophic technology of an idea. So this idea we're talking about the right balance of pain, is there's a pain and pleasure field in human behavior. And we need to first be aware that we can have too much or too little of either. And part of the challenge of life and mystery of life is constantly figuring out a better balance to make things work better. Not just for us as individuals, but when we have conversations and we strive together, when we meet, and we're going to have an event where we actually get together for the first time coming up, guys, in about a week and a half here. I'll give more information on that. But when we become stronger and better at balancing that as individuals, the culture will also reflect that in our communication with each other, in helping each other grow. And if that sounds like, a little bit too, fairy tale, you have to say to yourself, this was born out of, and Danny was very involved in this. I started when I left politics because I was saying the problems that I want to solve, my why they're not fixable in the political arena, because the corruption, it would be like if I was trying to take steroids out of bodybuilding and I was trying to compete as a professional bodybuilder. It's just not going to happen. Everyone pretty much knows if you want to beat, the pro Mr. Olympia, you're going to take steroids. It's known and it's open. But my why is like, I don't want cheating in politics. They are on steroids, the political system. There's a lot of cheating. There's a lot of, waste, fraud, and abuse, and it's rampant. I'm not trying to make villains of it. I'm talking about a system. So my why became, I got to go to the root of the problem, which is the moral and philosophical underpinnings that policy only always gets, you circumvent policy, because I saw what the written policies were, but I saw, people circumventing that policy because of their own greed and, their lust for power, and really just wanting to stay in office. And that was the priority. So we're trying to create this community, and Danny and I kind of connected on this because, I saw him with a why that actually would work if we take our concept of iteration. What would happen if everyone was doing what I'm doing? Not exactly what I'm doing, like not everyone doing athletic apparel, but trying to do a craft movement. What if everyone was trying to push in a craft direction for our economic system and our business? Well, that would be okay. That wouldn't really harm anything, because that would just balance the wealth out and the quality would go up, and it would be less about the fashion du jour. So there's a lot of tests that we can use, philosophical tests of whether our why is actually in good balance. And so between the pleasure and pain and between the why and the responsibility, that's the kind of conversations we want to just keep expanding, where people are not just talking about, I'm sure you guys have heard the expression, small minds talk about people, bigger minds talk about events, and the biggest minds talk about ideas. Danny and I started talking about ideas right out of the gate, and it's not because I think I have a bigger mind. I'm just working on a problem. I wish I was smarter. It would be easier, but I'm working on a problem that I think is really important, and that is how we interact as human beings and what our cultures become. It's a pretty serious problem.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge. So if I take it from my generation's perspective, I think that's something that people struggle with is, and not, everyone's been talking about this, but if you think about social media, if you think about the phone, is that from the moment people wake up, the first thing they do is check their phone and they go on social media. But the moment before they go to sleep, it's the same thing. And, I've developed this practice that has been tremendously helpful, is that the first hour of the day, I don't touch the phone, I don't look at the phone. And then the last hour, I don't do the same thing. And I started to realize that I have all these ideas in my head that weren't even mine. It was just all the data that I was taking in from my phone. And I was like, I had all these terrible ideas that I was just like, this is not even my voice. Like, this isn't me. And then, by doing that method of an hour before, after waking up, an hour before bed, is you start to self-reflect a little bit more and check in on yourself. And you start to kind of be able to realize, like, oh, this is what I want to do. These are my interests. This is what I actually believe. And I think people are just in this cycle of constant data and input in my generation, that they don't have the space to, check in on themselves. How are you feeling? Are you feeling healthy? Are you feeling stressed? Are you, maybe there's areas in your life that you're letting go by because you're too busy looking at your phone. And I think that can help start the process of people starting to discover their why, and then also look at their lives and be more authentic to that. I'm doing these things that are hurting me and I didn't even realize it. And that overall, just, if everyone started to do that, and it's not easy and it's not fun all the time. But I think that would help, achieve some of the things you're talking about.
How do you do
Yeah.
that, not touching the phone for the first hour of the day?
You literally throw it across the other part of the house, and my method of discipline is, if it's out of sight, out of mind. I'm not like one that can sit, like if there's cookies in front of me, I'm going to eat the cookies. So just don't buy the cookies. Like that's how I live my life. And I'm not fooling myself that I think it's just the best way to do it. So at first it was hard, and then it started becoming like a pleasure, because you're sitting there with your coffee, you're just thinking, and then you realize like, oh my gosh, I used to do this all the time when I was more in touch with myself, and I could think clearer. And it really is, for me, it's just a data thing. Like, you're hearing all these voices, you're reading all these tweets, you're looking at all these pictures. It's just data. And you're like, wait, I haven't heard myself talk in a while.
Yeah.
It's been something I recently did, and it's been so helpful. Just to, I feel like I'm, more aware of how I'm feeling. I feel like I'm more myself, and I honestly am not as, agitated.
Yeah.
And Sue,
And
this ties right back.
I'm sorry, Danny, I ask you that because that's something that I struggle with. Like, I want to be rid of the phone. I want to get it out of there. And, it keeps pulling me back because, I take the dog out for a walk. I leave the phone in the house. And then, I get home and Sean says to me, he's like, where were you? And I'm like, walking the dog. I went around the block.
Yeah.
And, like we were gone for half an hour. Well, what if I needed you? What if something happened? And I'm like, yeah, what? I don't know. What if? Well, did it happen? No. Could it happen? Yeah. But I'm like, where do you have that balance of being able to disconnect and get in touch with those thoughts? Because again, John, we've talked about this before, like what's the diet that we're feeding our bodies? We try to put, good, healthy food into our bodies. And Danny, you just brought up another one that we talk about before, is we also try to have a good diet for our minds. And sometimes, maybe we don't need to keep stuffing in the Doritos of social media, or, the some of the stuff that we don't need to have to constantly filter out. Maybe it's okay to just not eat for a little while.
Yeah, and Sue, this ties back to last week's with P-Psych on elevation. Danny, we didn't air that podcast yet, but we talked about the difference between compulsive behavior and conscious behavior, or just compulsive activity and conscious activity. So when you're following your stream, you're scrolling, it gets you're reacting, and that's kind of compulsive. Your feelings, like things make you mad, things make you laugh. Even when you're laughing, it's not actually voluntary. I mean, it's, you usually laugh involuntarily, and that's when it feels the best, right? So nothing wrong with laughter. It's a wonderful thing, but what you're doing is you're inserting conscious behavior at the front end and the back end of the day that allows you to think and self-reflect and come up with ideas from inside you instead of everything constantly from outside you. And that's why people, I think, start to feel anxious. So there's a balance. I mean, Sue, with you walking the dog, I mean, you could probably just say, well, I'm going to have my phone for emergencies, so I'll just keep it in my pocket, but in case somebody calls me, but I'm not going to do any scrolling or looking at texts or anything like that, or, whatever the rules need to be. But it can be done, but I think with the citizen body, what we're trying to do is, once you create a community, because this is what we found in organizations, once you get to a critical mass of people that are using energy in a good and constructive way with a really good why, then that is contagious and also instills a positive kind of peer pressure that more and more people, like that 5 people you hang around thing, Sue, we talked about, and many people talk about. And that's what we're trying to do is get the energy harnessed to good conscious thinking and driving forward in creativity, in growth, in responsibility, all the things that unite us as human beings. And I've seen it work in small organizations of 10 people, in 100, and there's no reason we can't just keep taking this out to a larger arena at the community level and beyond.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's like, I have a friend, Andrew, and we do these challenges together, and we did a bunch of fasting over past couple months, and having that partner, like when we do a 48-hour fast, it's not fun. And
Yeah.
but when you have a partner that's also, bought in, we would FaceTime each other, like, and it actually wasn't that hard. Like it was like, okay, I'm struggling with my friend, and we're in the same headspace, and it was really fun. And but it makes it, it makes it a little easier. And then, like you said, it's an energy thing. It's like we're all trying to do the same thing, and um, it makes it okay to overcome the challenges. And it's just something that I think people can apply on a smaller scale to their lives if they're trying to get into exercise, get an exercise buddy, even if you're not physically there with them, you can check in on your, did you work out today? Like, it's like an accountability partner.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like when you talk about like doing something consciously and using social media for something good, I have, we got a Peloton, April of last year, because of all the like pandemic and the gyms shut down. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We were able to get a Peloton. We didn't have to wait forever for it at the time. We'd already been talking about getting one. And then I discovered this training program in there. And then there's a Facebook group that kind of like bounced off of that. So they're not affiliated with Peloton, but it's all a bunch of Peloton users. And there's one girl in there, she put together these challenges, and there, it'll be certain, like she set out a whole training program, and it's like, wow, somebody is actually handing me a training program for free, which I mean, is a much more, if you've done, and like, it sounds like, you're athletic as well. And you recognize the value of when somebody, when you put into somebody working out, or a trainer that has, they put a lot into getting a program together for you. This is somebody who's taken like a lot of these rides and put them together in a sequence in a program. And then she puts all these people into like little groups and everything. And then we have our little group page, and people just encourage each other. And that's something that like that mostly pops up. Like when I do scroll social media, I've been trying to cut my diet down of that. But when I do scroll, like when I turn on my phone, those are the first things that pop up, because, breeding into like good things, I like my top people that you follow on Facebook, I put in people who, inspire me, or people who cheer me up, people who, I don't post political things, most of my posts involve my dog and my baby. And I get comments all the time. People see my baby, oh my gosh, she's the cutest baby ever. She's always smiling. And I put like good things about her, and she's smiling, and she's interacting, and she's doing great things. And people, they make comments on my page who are like, this cheers me up. This is what I want to see. I don't want to see the political diet. I am so refreshed by seeing your baby. And I'm thinking, oh geez, I'm probably annoying more people than I'm helping with my baby. But from the feedback I'm getting, that's obviously not true.
Yep. And that's the positive way you can use social media. Like my Twitter feed is, I don't follow many people. I follow like the interesting entrepreneurs that give out advice. I follow, different things I'm interested in, whether it's a sport and things like that, that kind of stay away from that. So like when I do go on Twitter, it's not this craziness of political stuff, which I'm not ignorant to, but it's just not, I don't think that it's healthy to every second of the day getting updates on news that you can't affect, or you can't make changes around. I just don't think that's healthy for your mind. But like you said, it's a diet thing. It's choosing the right food. You choose the right people to follow.
Yeah, exactly. I do the same thing. I haven't looked at Twitter in probably about 6 months, but the people who I do follow on Twitter, they're people that I'm interested in what they have to say. Or it's, an athlete that I enjoy something about them, or, somebody that makes me, my favorite comedian, somebody that makes me laugh, those are the types of things that I want to see. And like, that's the diet that I try to feed myself. And
and something I do, which surprises people, is I don't have those apps on my phone. I leave them to one device that I sometimes go on, and that has been tremendous in helping me staying off them. So like I don't have Instagram on my phone. I don't have Twitter on my phone. I don't have Snapchat. I delete those from my phone. 2 reasons, for my mental health, and then also for my productivity. Like as a CEO, I have a lot of work I have to do. And you can notice that you're going through your phone when you're trying to answer email. Boom, you pop over to Twitter. Boom, you pop over to Instagram. Well, now if it's not there, it's that I guess you could call it fake self-discipline, but it is something that helps you be more disciplined.
Yeah.
Do you use 2 phones, Danny?
No, so I just have I have my laptop and I can go on Instagram there, but it's not a great, they didn't develop it for the laptop, so it's like you don't.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yeah.
Twitter. I mean, Twitter. Yeah, it's for some reason, since I'm on my laptop less or I don't use it for fun things, I just end up not going on it as much.
It's good. I want to see if I could tie this together with something that I don't know when this podcast is going to actually air, but the GameStop thing is probably going to live on,
Sure.
in some kind of, in either infamy or something. But it's funny watching the energy, and what we do with the citizen body is always try to take it back to principles that help for more than one situation. In other words, it's sort of like martial arts. Like if you learn some self-defense moves that can help you in like a variety of situations, it's going to help. Some basic and fundamental skills that are going to protect you and get you the most good for the least time invested. In the information age, we realize our philosophy does not adequately train us or help us deal with the onslaught of information. What's real, what's not real, what has to be fact-checked, what fact-checked, it has to be fact-checked, what do I trust? And so we're watching human energy basically scramble in this ocean of information and like kind of grasping at straws for for control and for, some power. There's a big power thing at play here. So the GameStop thing became a David and Goliath story, popularly in the press. It was, the little guys stuck it to the big guys. We have an article coming up on the blog about this, but to kind of summarize the argument we make is, we look at iteration. Can we take the middle class and make it basically win the war of, balancing the economy better by going and trading stocks? I think most people, once they extrapolate and take a look at, iterating the GameStop scenario, that is not a sustainable strategy to create a strong economy. So the article kind of lays this out a little bit, but take that same energy then, and rather than having sort of a vengeance motive, a gotcha motive, which I understand, but we really try not to vilify anyone in our philosophy. What we try to do is say, well, how do we just direct our energy better? So if we took that energy and we said, what's the why? Like, why are we doing this? Are we doing this to stick it to the bad guy that's got the money? Okay, well, is that a good why? What if we're just taking that human responsibility that connects us all, and we're just quietly and peacefully directing it to the craft movement, to the small businesses, to the smaller enterprises, the ones that are suffering so much right now in coronavirus that, some of them, we've lost many. They used to employ, I think, 75 to 80% of people. I think we're down just above 50% now. And then again, well, what happens is then power concentrates, and then the jobs become more and more miserable because they're more and more monolithic in philosophy and narrative. And if you don't abide with that, you feel more and more confined. See, a monarchy or some kind of autocratic government or an oligarchy like we have now, the reason we feel so sort of, we feel like constrained and even I call it zombified is because there's sort of a narrative you march to, and if you don't, you feel like some kind of freak or outsider. We see the best of humankind coming from the free-thinking, creative type people. So we want to champion that, and then we want the income to be distributed naturally. But if we take our GameStop energy and we isolate it and we say, rather than attacking these particular 3 hedge fund guys, and by the way, you made 2 more people, made them about $1 billion and another like $750 million while you were putting the other guys down. You elevated other wealthy people that you were probably mad at too. So when you start looking at the totality of what's going on, of how human energy is being applied, you start to see, oh, there's a better way to apply this. We could shop small. We could vote small. And by the way, when we do that, it's not a motivation of vengeance. It's not a motivation of greed. It's not a motivation of winning and creating losers and making other people suffer. You know, I get it. I mean, we get why we feel like people that have more than their fair share, you know, maybe it feels good to have that rebalance. But we have to stop shy, because we're doing it in politics too, where we actually want them to experience, you know, some kind of like, it's like we're exacting some kind of revenge.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's not talked about enough with GameStop, which I totally get the sentiment of being upset with the, you know, Wall Street and the hedge funds. I mean, they completely obliterated the world economy in 2008, and there was no repercussions for it. Were very minimal. But when this whole GameStop situation, they don't realize by their actions, they actually there was a possibility of crashing the whole economy. And this is because, basically, not to get too technical, was that you were going to force these hedge funds and these other companies to sell their good stock of like Apple and Amazon to cover their losses. And once that happens, like we saw this in March where there's a huge crash, is once these big guys have to start selling and de-risking, everyone is forced to sell their stocks. So then you have a massive crash, like you did, a really sharp crash in March. And there was a potential for that, because these guys have to cover their losses. And there is this process of de-risking that would have forced everyone to sell, and just to summarize. And how horrible would that have been if, you know, what they thought was doing something, you know, to get back at these guys, but then they just destroy the U.S. economy and everyone's savings and retirements, and like we did in 2008. Like that is, you know, that's why sometimes vengeance isn't always the right way to go about it. And I mean, you know, somebody I think about sometimes is, you know, Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X. And, you know, Martin Luther King's method was to not, you know, be vengeful. He had every right. They had every right to be angry and pissed off. But what it ended up working the best was, because you had to live with these people, was taking the high route of, you know, he always talked about love and things like that. And that's really, you know, I think with these, you know, corrupt politicians and hedge funds is you have to take the high road of trying to educate, you know, the masses of what's really going on, and then hopefully enacting change that way.
Yeah. At the end of the day, guys, I mean, you know, the U.S. felt in some way morally like on a better ground. Like, this is better for all people. Like, when there's bugs in the code, obviously everyone realizes now when they said all men are created equal, and, you know, we're going to be a government of the people, by the people. Like, this was, you know, groundbreaking at the time for how to do it better, avoid monarchies, avoid concentration of power. You know, this is the struggle we've been fighting. But what you're saying about the MLK idea is, it's true. It's a spiritual idea. I mean, when you're taking the higher road, what does that really mean? It means that, like, you're trying to approach a higher order, a closer to perfection of character, a higher power. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a deity that you ascribe a name to, but it is a higher order. It's more powerful because it doesn't need to destroy to create peace.
Yep.
Now, we get that it doesn't always work, but what we're doing is designing that philosophic system that keeps upgrading, you know, building off MLK. I love his quote about science has outrun spirituality. We have guided missiles and misguided men. He's saying this, you know, 50, 60 years ago. And we actually have him as one of our inspiring figures. And it's just that idea of, we call it elevation, and that's the last podcast with P. Psych, Sue, is that, you know, it really is about that climb to the higher road. It takes more work. It can be a little bit more painful. But when we start doing that as individuals, and this conversation keeps spreading, and we start then doing that as more and more larger groups are doing that, that's the same thing that happens in organizations, where you're taking that higher. It's like the difference between, you know, the first iPhone that came out and the operating system, and what is it? What are we on, the 12 now? Or I lost track.
We're the 14.
13.
Yeah, there's
What, 14
coming up, iOS 14.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
shows you where
14
I'm
is
at.
the operating system, but I think the last one is the 12 that they've produced. I still have the 10.
Oh yeah, phone.
But
Yeah,
that's-
sorry,
I'm
phone.
hanging
thinking
on to it
operating.
as long as I can.
Sorry.
Oh, you were doing the operating system. Okay. But yeah, it's actually the operating system. I mean, there's technology in the device too, but the operating system is what we're talking about in human beings, because our devices don't really change much. But that's just, you know, the old idea of the electricity being unharnessed power, and, you know, human energy, all that vitriol, all that emotion is the same thing as like a lightning bolt. When you start putting electricity through a very, very exacting apparatus and code, you get things like what we're able to do on this call. You get things like, you know, write a poem in it and share it with a bunch of people. You know, when you just let electricity run rampant without any, you know, apparatus and rules and code to go by, you're just going to have random energy. And random energy comes down to, you solve things by killing each other. You know,
Yeah.
a fist fight is like the worst, you know, disorder of energy, of human energy. It's like the lowest grade of human energy. It's basically the base transaction of war, a fist fight. You know,
And I think, you know, we have a lot of people that are feeling in the United States kind of helpless and dejected, and they don't really, their voice isn't being heard. But when you talk about, you know, when we talk about the things we're talking about, like Martin Luther King, it's when you build that community of unity, of you know, we might not agree on everything, but the people, you know, the people of the United States, if we were to, you know, somehow unify a little bit more, we then hold the power of, you know, because at the end of the day, we're the ones that vote these politicians in, and they're going to do what we want because, you know, we're voting them in, but we're so disjointed. And for me, it's like you know, I wish that each side could see they need each other, and they, like, to me, I look at it like a brain. Like the left has certain characteristics that are really important. The right has certain characteristics that are really important. And when they're put together, you have a fully functioning brain. And I'm pretty like, I see a lot of both sides. Like I like a lot of the ideas on the left, and I like a lot of ideas on the right. I just think that if they could, you know, use their strengths together, then they could affect change appropriately. Because the left is pointing out a lot of inequality and social issues that we need to change. But, you know, the right historically, and this might upset people, but their mind is a little bit better with economics and with finance. And that's just the personality traits. So it's like the responsibility of the right is, I know these things are a problem, and I know that there are solutions to fix them. Why we have to address them. We have to work with the left, who is really good at pointing these issues out, because they're always forward thinking. They're progressives. So they're pointing the issues out. And it's like, if we could kind of combine those two, you know, parts together, you could really come up with some great ideas.
Yeah. And it also
Absolutely.
seems a lot of times with, you know, when you talk about politicians and, you know, like, what is it that we want? When you say, you know, like, well, is everybody, you know, you could get them all in the room and say, you know, well, we want peace. Well, of course, everybody wants peace. Nobody's going to be the one person nowadays. Maybe there is, but, you know, nobody says, yeah, I want war, you know,
Yeah.
but they, you know, they might, it's about how you accomplish that goal is what divides them. And again, they don't focus on, you know, the concept of peace, or, you know, whatever the issue is that's on the table. Yeah. Of, you know, like what unites them and working together to solve the problem. Yeah. And, you know, they make such a big deal when it's like, oh, we've got a bipartisan committee and we're going to have, everybody's going to work on this together, and yeah. Woo. And it's like, isn't that really kind of how it ought to
The-
be? Like, shouldn't you
Yeah.
be starting from there and not, having
The-
to go through all that other nonsense to
So-
get to that point?
The thing I think about too is, so if you take Bernie Sanders, for instance, like he probably, like, I think a lot of people agree, like we think he genuinely wants to help people. Like he
Yeah.
seems genuine. I don't agree with any of his ideas.
Yeah.
But I like him because he's genuine. Now, instead of the right poking fun of him, like, oh, people send him economics textbooks all the time, and they poke fun at him. It's like, okay, you guys understand economics. He's pointing out things that are wrong in the system. Yes, he doesn't know how to fix them, but he's acknowledging the problems. Stop poking fun of him. Help him to come up
Help them
with better
fix it.
ideas,
Yeah.
fix those issues, because the issues are still there. But it's
So if go ahead, Danny.
we're just so, it's hard to get out of your own brain and characteristics.
Well, right, but if you do back up and take the alien perspective, you see Bernie as a great diagnosis. He's use Bernie for the diagnosis, and then use other people for coming up with some of the policy solutions. But what we say is that don't try to fix everything in the political arena, because we have to focus on ourselves and what we could do. And that's where the shop small, vote small comes in.
Yep.
It's like you're using your own power better en masse. And GameStop showed the power of uniting as a group, right?
Mhm.
But our argument is it's not very productive. It can be damaging. Like you said, Danny, it could have disrupted the economy and had a reverse effect, actually, right? And it probably hurts some people that just have legitimate, index funds that their retirements in too. It can be very disruptive to that. So that's like kind of playing with fire, and it's not a sustainable fix. But yeah, so if we get good at this philosophic system, we can look at Bernie and say, what's the value of Bernie? Well, his diagnosis, maybe this policy is good, maybe this one's good, maybe that one's good. But to have that conversation, I love the left and right brain analogy, especially with the citizen body, Danny. That really is almost necessary to have those two sides. We're not just all going to be in the middle. Nature doesn't just have the middle. It has rainy days and sunny days. It has hot and cold. It has positive and negative in the electron. Like the work gets done in the middle. The electrons aren't vilifying the protons, and the protons aren't vilifying the electrons. The problem to keep in mind, though, guys, is that the system has become so corrupted and warped from what it originally was supposed to be that almost anything they do is tainted with that corruption, and it becomes difficult to get any integrity out of what they're doing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because the whole system of money driving it and who puts them in those seats and keeps them in those seats is messed up to begin with. So that by the time you get to Biden and Trump, the system has completely given you like really no real an ostensible choice that looks like this is the bad guy. This side sees that guy's the bad guy. That side sees that guy's the bad guy. And then, okay, the lesser of two evils thing that we all lament. But if you had those 23 people running, those 5 independents that were running that people don't know about, that the news media didn't tell us about, the Libertarian candidate, the Green, the Constitution candidate, the Alliance candidate, the Socialist candidate, if you really were having a conversation about all those people, then you'd really see a choice, and then you could really feel your power to like go with someone else. Mm-hmm. But we get caught up in the system that's like, oh my God, if this guy wins, it's going to be King Kong. And if, we end up with King Kong or Godzilla, we don't really win.
Yep.
Yeah. And Danny, it's funny that you brought up like the left brain and the right brain and the way that they interact. When a person has a stroke, a person who has a stroke on the right side of their brain, which would probably be more left-sided body involvement, mm-hmm. That person tends to be like, there are certain tendencies that you might see in that stroke, and it's different from for every single person. Yeah. So, like I know that if I've got somebody who's coming in who has left hemiplegia, which is weakness on that side of the body, I'm like, all right, that's going to be the person who has the tendency to be impulsive. They're going to overestimate their abilities. They have a hard, like, they might have a hard time with visual spatial relationships, like things look different. And a lot of times they might have like a visual field cut or a left neglect, where they like literally, they cannot see what's on the left side of the, you know, like their visual field. So, and, you know, doubting Thomas, we believe what we see. Everything just looks so skewed to that person. Conversely, if you have a stroke on the left side of your brain, which would be the right side body involvement, that person tends to be more cautious, usually because of where the stroke could be. It's usually in the, it can be in the language centers of their brain. So that person may have a hard time with expressive language or understanding language, or both. But that person tends to just like approach things more cautiously. And that's in a brain that has sustained some sort of trauma or an injury from either a stroke or a brain injury. And it's interesting because like those are the things that we're trying to fix as we do that. So, you know, like when I approach a person and I'm like, okay, you know, I can expect this person to be impulsive,
Right.
but maybe they're going to maybe this prior to their stroke, they were the most cautious person, the most, you know, very, very like regimented, and it's going to be way out of their personality to be impulsive. So they might just have what might look like regular behavior, but to them it's impulsive. But to me, I'm like, oh, he's not jumping out of the chair. He's not thinking that he can get up and walk and his leg is completely flaccid. You know, it's also when you're approaching, you know, when we have like the one side and the other side in politics, you know, like you said, you know, Bernie has some great ideas, but you just don't agree with his execution of it. I'm not going to come out and say, you know, like, oh my gosh, this guy hates Bernie. You know, you obviously don't hate him, but a lot of times, like, people and the way that they're perceiving things, it's like, if you're not on my side, if you're not totally agreeing with me, then you're against me. And people, I think, really have a hard time extrapolating the nuances with that.
And I think something that people have to do, and there's a lot of research that says, you know, political viewpoints, a lot of it can be just traced back to your personality traits and your own biases. And it's really important to understand, to the best of your ability, because it's impossible. We all have blind spots, but understand like your type of personality traits. Are you more cautious? Are you a risk taker? Are you these things? Are you what you're talking about with these patients is like, if you know your baseline, you can kind of catch yourself flowing into ideas that fit your types of characteristics. And then being able to take a step back and go like, I genuinely like these types of ideas, but maybe I am just, you know, I'm just built that way and I should really think about the other side as well. Or, you know, when you are able to take that mindset, you can come up with really good ideas, because I really believe that a lot of solutions are nuanced, and it depends. Context is super important. So, you know, the way that, you know, I think the economy should be run is some type of hybrid of socialism and hyper-capitalism. And it's like, people will be like, wait, you socialism? And I'm like, well, there are certain parts of capitalism that rear its ugly head. And listen, I think there are parts of capitalism that I absolutely adore, but there's certain parts of, like, for instance, me and my dad were talking the other day about drug prices, and that there were companies that were bought out, and these people took drugs that were life-saving drugs and took them from like $45 to $500 for no apparent reason, right? And in capitalism, what you try to do is maximize profits. So that's an area where, like, the incentive to maximize profits to sell drugs is not always the best. You have the opioid crisis. You know, McKinsey just got sued. This consulting firm got sued $570 million for pushing opioids. And like those types, like, so those areas of the part of the economy, like trying to maximize profits can lead to bad results. And so it's like taking the balance of, well, you need money to help people, but you also need to help people. So it's like, if you can combine those two things of capitalism and you know, what you would call socialism, but not true socialism. That's how you can really affect change. Is like, you need the, you know, if we're all poor, yeah, we're more equal, but we're all poor, versus if you create wealth, but then do it in a way that everyone can be involved. That's where I think, you know, where America can really go to the next level of being an example of, once again, being an example to the world of, this is how you create a great nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we also need, Danny, to stop trying to focus unilaterally on the ism or blend of isms to fix it. Our argument is a philosophical technology. If people have a better philosophic system, a lot of this falls into place. It's like the Plato idea. If you had perfect morality, you need less laws, almost no laws. If everyone were just perfectly moral, then the laws would be less and less necessary. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying citizen body believes we'll never need laws, but I think we absolutely agree that there's some blend. We already have a blend of socialist type programs. The big cutoff is the ownership of the means of production. That I think would never get to in America.
Yeah.
And that's where I think people get scared, meaning like you don't really have private business anymore, the government. Our fundamental principle of power is any concentration of power, whether it's government, whether it's business, whether it's social, any concentration of power too much is bad. So that's why every ism fails, because, you know, there's problems with communism, there's problems with socialism, there's problems with capitalism. And I tell people, take your focus off the ism and focus on whether power is concentrating, because it's sort of like the facade for the public of the ism, you know, and then what actually happens. I mean, I was just talking to someone from Cuba, and she was showing us pictures of where they lived and where she was visiting and how the people lived, and they were living completely impoverished. No car was, you know, younger than 40 years old or so. And then she said, and then these other people are living with like Bentleys and Cadillacs and just like living like royalty. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, it's communist, isn't it? And she's like, well, it doesn't feel like communism, because in her mind, communism is everybody's kind of equal. And that's the way my father described it too. But I'm like, okay, so communism gets corrupted, socialism gets corrupted, we're now dealing with corrupted capitalism here, right? The common denominator is the human morality. So that we have to be careful, this mindset that the ism is by itself going to be the solution. And that's where the citizen body comes in, because we can't just rely on policy and the ism, because name an ism that hasn't been corrupted.
Yeah, I think isms are poor descriptions of what you really need. Because once again, when you go to the isms, you take out room for context and situations and nuance. But yeah, you know, you start with the beginning. You start with the people. You start with, you know, giving them the right ways to think about things, the resources, the community. That's how you really solve that problem. Like, yeah, it's really difficult to make changes in today's politics. It's damn near impossible.
And
because
I think,
the lobbyists,
John,
the money,
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say the money controls it. And when the people get poorer, they don't have the money. But by shopping small and voting small, you can start putting the money back in the people's hands. Mm-hmm. But go ahead, Sue.
I was just going to say, so, you know, kind of tying this back into what we've been talking about, which is, you know, what unites us. And it's, you know, our topic today is human responsibility. And, you know, I think, like, you know, each of us has the responsibility to, you know, bring what we bring to the table. And, you know, you said it best, John, we're unique in a way that we can either create or destroy. And that's one of the things that, you know, we have a responsibility, you know, like, you know, which person do you want to be? What do you want to bring out of each person? What is it about your philosophy or your beliefs that you can bring to the table that are going to create something good and solve the problem versus just, you know, contribute to an existing problem or tear down something existing that is good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and many people have given up. And I actually, my first mentor, who I call I joke sometimes about Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker was, Darth Vader was very successful, right? He, ruled the Death Star and, the dark side pretty much, right? I mean, I know there were people above him, but, he was high up and he was trying to bring Luke over to the dark side, right? And I wanted to understand the tricks, and, where to shoot the Death Star to destroy it. But we had philosophical conversations, this mentor and I, about cynicism versus he called me an idealist. And I said, well, his thing was, you're either getting screwed over by the rest of the people or you're screwing them, and I'm not going to be screwing them. I don't believe people are basically good. But guess what? His philosophy is winning right now. That's what's happening,
Yeah.
But what I decided is we have to figure out how to be smart enough to, how everything's a technological war, like, when we first started out on the internet, our passwords were like our name or like Apple or like something real simple. Now they have to be like 9 to 12 characters with one special character, capitals, lowercase, number. You know what I mean? Like it's getting, and then dual authentication and the war of technology is like there's always someone trying to like maximize, hack and commit cyber crimes, right? And it keeps evolving. They get smarter, we get smarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that the philosophical war is it's easier. It's that, and this gets back to that elevation and path of lesser resistance. It's easier to be bad. There's a famous quote about, I'll make a beast of myself to take away the pain of being a man. And it's funny, I forget the author who first wrote that, but I know it. It's going to sound funny, but from a Avenged Sevenfold song.
Okay.
And it's a really cool song. It's like, they're like, I guess you would call them like thrash metal or groove metal. It's actually a really good song from probably 20 years old at this point. But you understand that quote? It's like, it's painful to be good sometimes because you watch people cheat and get ahead of you.
Yeah.
You watch bodybuilders become Mr. Olympia because you're not taking steroids, and I'm not saying they're cheating. They all basically agree to that in that sport.
Mm-hmm.
But we know what happened with Lance Armstrong, right?
Yeah.
We know people got to be the Pope and they probably knew what was going on or looked the other way. Joe Paterno at Penn State, politicians that lied, presidents that have been impeached for lying. Obamacare, we got lied to. I'm not vilifying Obama. I'm just saying that it was definitely, we were sold a bill of goods that didn't turn out to be true.
Yeah.
It's harder for Obama to come out and say, yeah, best we could do is your health insurance is probably going to go up like $3,000 to $6,000. You're going to lose your doctor and your plan, but we really need to do this. Got your vote? Like it wouldn't have passed.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the truth. And the problem is we almost, it's like one of my favorite comics is what is it? It's, I forget the words used, comforting lies and unpleasant truths. And the comforting lies guy has this giant line at his booth, and there's no one in the line of the guy's booth that has the sign unpleasant truths.
Yeah.
So
I think
Citizen Body is trying to close that gap a little bit.
Yeah, I think, just going off of, you said Star Wars, but you see these movies that kind of take pop culture by storm. You think about like Harry Potter. And the thing that I think people can take away from Harry Potter is like, that's more like life. Like Harry being on the good side, you get your teeth kicked in nonstop. But at the end, when there's a scene where he's going through all the things that he's grateful for, his friends, his family, not his family, his family's gone, but his friends and the relationships he's built, going through that tough journey of doing what is morally right. He looks at the other side and he looks at Voldemort and he goes, you have nothing. You don't have those relationships. You don't have that meaning, that purpose. And he goes, I feel bad for you. And I think that's what people can realize is like when you go on this journey of what you're doing, John, and what you're doing, Suzanne, it's like you're gonna get your teeth kicked in. That's just a part of it. But the the relationships you'll build, the meaning you'll derive from it is unlike anything else you'll experience. And at the end of the day, that's what is most valuable. And that's, what can keep you moving, and what should attract people is that the other side of things of stealing, not stealing money, but doing these nefarious things to make a lot of money is you just feel empty inside. There isn't much there. And that's kind of how I think about those things.
And that's why if we grow a culture where people have a spiritual foundation, because what happens is, I think about that mentor, and he had a wife, he wasn't like in and out of, marriages and all that, and 2 kids, but I knew the unhappiness of the son in particular. But what can happen is life can be just becoming like therapy, like everything's a palliative to insulate you from really looking at yourself and being alone by yourself and finding your true character. And you can avoid that. Like, we've constructed a culture that kind of avoids that, but it's the price we end up paying is where we're at now. We don't challenge our character to be honest. The most pure feeling I had of I don't even know what the word is, but victory, I guess, is the best word in my life, was in little league football when the other team was cheating, and I knew they were cheating and the refs weren't catching it, but we still won. And I was like, I would score a touchdown and I would just be like, this is such an incredible feeling, not because I'm so great because I scored a touchdown, but because honesty won and beat dishonesty and cheating. And it just filled me with this incredible feeling of power that was like, not mine to showcase, but just of the principle of human beings can overcome, something lesser ordered, lower order, we call that evil, but what that really is that's just less organized, lower consciousness. It's more primal. It's more animalistic to cheat and to lie and to steal. Truth is higher order if you retain it, because truth is a really tricky thing because it can be very liberating and joyous. It can also be very painful, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a complicated relationship. One of our 3 big things are truth, balance, and growth. And they lead into the other founding principles. But, the truth is very elusive these days, right? And sometimes it's scary when you start learning some truth and then you wonder what is the truth. Then it gets frustrating wondering if something is true or not. We go through that every day. But if we're all united in pursuing it, for better or for worse, regardless of our egos and what our belief systems are, then that's a way to unite. And that's what we're trying to do here. And then if we're all also agreeing that balance is better than, extreme disproportion, then that's second. And then the third is that everyone's growing, because there's an innate human desire to grow in some way. Nobody really wants to stay exactly where they are and in no way improve whatsoever. Most people want to grow in intellectual, psychological, in their relationship, physically, they want to grow in skills they want to develop, languages they want to learn. So, we're really looking at the philosophical underpinnings and how people can start to wield their power better because they're on a better system that allows them to utilize their energy to actually empower themselves, not just economically, but politically and in information, intellectually, and even in their art and adoration of celebrities and, who they kind of worship,
Yeah. Yeah. So Danny, tell me this, kind of, just kind of changing gears and starting to tie this all together. What about COVID? I mean, you became CEO, you said about 1 year and 7 months ago. And, then we've been in the pandemic coming up on 1 year now, we're probably just a few weeks out of a year that everything shut down. And we're talking about responsibility and also growth. What did you have to do? Like, how did you have to adjust?
Oh man. Well, fortunately enough, I feel like some of my characteristics is I thrive in uncertainty, and I think that's what has led me to be able to handle the pandemic from a business standpoint a lot better. Is, I think we've gone through 4 manufacturers at this point, and that's because we were switching supply chain to do more stuff domestic, but domestic is United States, their manufacturing is getting absolutely crushed. They can't have as many people. It's extremely slow. It's extremely disorganized. So I went through about 3 or 4 manufacturers in the US before I could finally get one that is producing our gear now. And then I also had to source one. I had to go back to one of our manufacturers in Portugal, in Europe. And that sounds easy, but you're talking about new teams, onboarding them with all the products we're trying to do, getting the trims, getting the sourcing from them. And I think a lot of people would probably have quit because it's just so disheartening when you go to another manufacturer and they eventually can't end. You go through the whole process and they can't end up actually producing for you. And
you had to start at like ground zero 4 or 5 times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's 2 things. It's, I didn't create the pandemic, but it's now my responsibility to navigate the business through those challenges. And then number 2 is I have a responsibility to the people that are invested in the company to, solve these problems. And I could have made a lot of excuses, but my why is I'm trying to achieve this goal, and like, that's just not an option. It doesn't compute in my brain. I don't allow it to compute in my brain of, oh, I'm just going to give up. It's too tough. It's like, no, you got to keep solving the problem, keep solving the problem, keep solving the problem, till where we're in a position now where actually I think we're in the best position production-wise that we've ever been. And it illuminated areas that we could have done better that we wouldn't have realized if we didn't go through having to change production and trying new things and trying different things. We've kind of come out of it with a better vision of what we want our product to be, because of the pandemic. But that, like, a lot of, like, if we would have quit, it would have been understandable. But in the end, when you push through that challenge, we're in a better space. And from a sales side is that we quickly shifted to digital. And now, our digital is doing really well, and it's something that we can scale into the future, and it requires less capital. So it's like those 2 things were really tough to do. But in the end, we're going to have a more balanced business because we're going to balance our stores with, new supply chain, with, online, and then we're going to hopefully, be in the best position we've ever been after the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of like really being able to try to adapt, and, like, it sounds like all of your experiences have led up to you being able to build that resiliency that you can overcome. Because like we were talking, I think a little bit before we started recording the podcast, we were talking about a book that we've both read, you probably more recently and remember it better than I do. But it was, I didn't create this problem. It's, but I need to find a way to deal with it. I need to solve it.
It's not my fault, but it's my responsibility. And, I don't take things personal. Like when things happen to me or happen to the business, I don't get down on myself. I don't go, oh no, not like, I don't take it personal. I go, that's like, if I think about Harry Potter, that's hey, what would Harry Potter do? That's just a normal, he just, like, it sounds silly, but like,
no, it doesn't. I love it.
Art imitates life. And it's like, what would he do? It's like, he got, his legs taken out from him nonstop. And it's like, oh, that's just the normal part of business, especially in this environment. I'm going to keep pushing and until I can anymore. And hopefully we're on the better side of it after that. And we are. And but I wouldn't have had that mentality unless I, started as a sales associate, had the time to grow and develop. And yeah, I'm 26 running as a company, which is really fast. But I had those experiences that taught me, like, oh yeah, this is just normal part of business. Failure is just normal. Pain is just normal. And you always end up on the better side of things when you go through it.
Yeah. And I think what's unusual with you is that at your age, you recognize that that's something that, like I can think of all the lessons, all the things that, like you hear your parents say and they tell you about different things. And when you're young, a lot of that stuff goes in one ear and out the other. And then, next thing you know, you're in your mid 30s, early 40s, and you're saying, oh my gosh, mom and dad are the smartest people I ever met. When you're your age, they're like, those old people, they don't know what they're talking about.
I had, my parents kind of embodied everything I'm saying right now. So I would see my dad, like, they wouldn't always verbalize it to me, like, too much. I would see it and I'd be around it. And I guess I've just internalized it myself. Like my dad, like when I was little, he would tuck me in, but he would be reading books and he'd be reading about it. Like he works in investing, but so it wasn't like, he was off the clock, right? He's not getting paid to read those books, but he felt it was his fiduciary responsibility to be learning as much as possible because he's handling people's hard-earned money. And like, I never thought about that until like I, I grew up and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like I kind of do that too, because he showed me, what it means to be, a responsible adult almost in a sense.
Back to the responsibility.
Yeah. And my mom, same thing is, you agree to something, you become responsible for it. Your name's on it. You have to give it your best effort, even when challenges come up.
Yeah. So, John, is there anything else that we wanted to tie in today with? I think we covered a lot today, didn't we?
Yeah, since we've doubled the time, but I do think I can kind of tie this in with something that's really important. And thanks, Danny. That was some great kind of ideas and insight. And it's funny, I never read Harry Potter, and it's kind of a shame on me. It's like a gap in my knowledge, but I guess it was a little bit generational. Sounds like you did, Sue, right?
I saw one of the movies. I've seen like one or two of the movies. I started some of the books. It's actually something. I have a baby who's about to be 6 months old next week, and I'm going to wait until she's a little bit older. But Harry Potter is something that I am really dying to read to her. My partner, he read Harry Potter to his older children, and they've always had that Harry Potter piece of things. So I'm like, I kind of know a little bit of the story, but not a lot of it.
Yeah.
Looking forward to diving into it.
The reason I bring it up and try to tie this together is because one of our inspirational figures for the Citizen Body is Joseph Campbell, who was a mythologist who dealt with basically, every religion you could think of in the world and tried to find the common threads. And he wrote a book called The Hero's Journey. And he described how almost all the major religions would take, this journey, and it would be recurring themes. And it was always, the hero gets born, and then they go out into the world and confront challenges. And then they grow as a result of these challenges. And then either tragedy occurs or some great battle, and then they rise above it, and then they return home. So this was the recurring theme. And when we zoom back and take the alien perspective, we can start to see the value of that. And Danny just mentioned one of the things that keeps him going is kind of a hero's journey for Harry Potter, right? There's something, he confronts these challenges, he overcomes them, and then probably returns back in some way to kind of like reconcile everything. That's part of our operating system as human beings is, we go to that place when we're confronting our own challenges. And that's why religion, I tell people it's never a good idea to just completely throw it out like it's some kind of evil, like completely discard it. There's great lessons in there. What we're trying to do is give people a philosophic system that coincides with that hero's journey, where it doesn't have to be as much about superstition and fantasy or even fiction, and more about how, once again, actually apply it in your real life. So hopefully today was another step. The conversation was about twice as long as we thought, guys, because it was good.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just the theme was human responsibility and, you know, the right measure of pain and pleasure as that ties into it, because sometimes being responsible is a little painful, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully people can focus on that and start thinking about how that plays out. And in combination with the other podcasts and our other content, maybe start to feel like they're actually getting some skills to make life a little bit better.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Danny, thanks for being with us today. This was awesome. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate being able to, you know, chat about these types of things with you guys.
Yeah. And so I definitely want to give you a little plug, Endeavor Athletic.
Yep. Endeavor Athletic, just endeavorathletic.com. That's where you can kind of see what I'm working on. And we have a lot of great stuff coming out over the next 6 months that we've been putting a lot of effort into. And I think the products are awesome. So
I will definitely be checking it out. And you're local to, I don't know if, because some of the people who are watching us may not necessarily know, we are in the Philadelphia area.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so if anybody's in the Philadelphia area and wants to check you out, where's your stores?
So our store is, the one that's open is in Ardmore, PA. So
Okay. Is it
Square?
I was just going to ask suburban. Okay. Yeah.
But they could go online internationally and buy.
Yep.
Oh yeah, but I was just,
Yeah.
I was going for myself. If I want to stop by, I can stop by.
Oh yeah, for you. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. You are too, John. You should be stopping in.
He was.
Oh, I own
Christmas gifts.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. He didn't get me anything.
Well, I can't help you with that.
I know.
It's a long story. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll have time. Maybe we'll address it in the next podcast.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yes.
do
So
that.
you've been watching or listening to the Citizen Body Podcast, or as we call it, the Bodycast. And we had Danny Ehrlichman with us and John Katrina. And it's been a great session, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thanks, Sue.
Yep. All right. Take care.
See you guys. Bye.